I'm Betty Turner, and I'm a member of the WASP, the Women's Air Force Service Pilots of WW2. We were the first military women pilots and the reason women were allowed to fly in the military today. I want to tell you how I and many of the women in the WASP became flyers, in spite of being girls in a man's world, and lack of money for some of us and a dream for most of us. We started Jackie Cochran, wife of Floyd Odlum, who controlled Atlas Corporations and its subsidiary, Consolidated Vultee Aircraft. She was convinced she could help alleviate the increasing acute pilot shortage. On September 28, 1941, she wrote Eleanor Roosevelt, and wife of the president, that women could release men pilots for combat duty should the need arise. Jackie tried through the president, the Secretary of War Stanton, General Arnold, and Colonel Olds, commanding officer of the Ferrying Command, and she was told to gather information. Colonel Olds told Jackie to find out how many qualified and available women there were to qualify to serve as ferry pilots. Of the 3,000 licensed pilots in the United States to fly, only 131 of these women had hours, more than 200 solo hours, and that was the minimum requirement for a commercial license. Only 50 would pass other qualifications necessary for a ferry pilot. She, on her own, she sent questionnaires out to women pilots. She found only 30 women had more than 1,000 flying hours, 20 between 500 and 1,000 hours. 28 could possibly qualify for the Ferry Command with 350 to 500 hours. Cochran made proposals in which General Arnold turned down. He told Cochran to go to England and study their methods to recruit women. Nancy Love began flying at the age of 16. She started selling airplanes in Boston in the mid-30s and had married Robert Love, president of the Boston Intercity Airlines. Love wrote to Lieutenant Colonel Olds in May of 1941, informing him she knew of qualified women pilots who could ferry planes. The idea appealed to Colonel Olds, and as there was a shortage of ferry pilots. To meet the needs of pilots, the government instituted flight training in each interested college or university under the Civil Aeronautics Administration, the CAA. And the plan offered classes to 10 students or to the school. They were to contract with an independent or fixed-base operator at a local airport who supplied all the textbooks, the airplanes and the flight instructors, and ground school training necessary for each student to attain a license to fly. From these civilian pilots, the training program, the CPTP, was formed. And not only were there men pilots and instructors, but ferry pilots for the U.S. They could take one woman out of every 9 men. These women were to be hired as CPTP flight instructors after they graduated. The women offered their services to the Army Air Corps. General Arnold turned them down. He did. Nancy then wrote to CAA and looked up the available pilots. She wrote to Colonel Olds saying she knew of 49 or more women that could be ferry pilots. Colonel Olds took the letter to General Arnold, who said there was no need for women pilots, but they could replace commercial pilots on airlines that so they could assume military duties. That's what his idea was of hiring women. Nancy was finally given permission to recruit highly qualified and civilian women pilots, and she founded the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Service. They had to have a commercial license, over 200 hours. Some were instructors, and many of them had qualified requirements. The WASP were activated at Newcastle Army Air Base, Delaware, and to the initial request for women pilots, Nancy Love and the ATC received responses from 23 women by October 15, 1942. Those accepted ultimately reached a total of 28. That's what she got. It was
first class.
Final total. The WASP were seasoned pilots and had to have a commercial license and be no more than 35 years of age, and they had to be at least 21 years old. Betty Gillies was the first one accepted, and she became Nancy's second in command. Now, Cornelia Ford, who was the third accepted, had been flying with a student at Pearl Harbor the morning that on December 7th. And she had a student out teaching him to to land, really. And because she was going to solo him, and she saw these planes come over. And she saw the rising sun on them. And she knew the only time they'd see the rising sun is when on boats going through the channel, And so she watched them and saw one leave the group and go over and drop something, and it exploded. Well, she immediately took over control, told her student she would take over control. And she landed the plane, and when they ran to the hangar, the Japanese came over and shot up her planes. There were 3 students out at the time in the practice area, and they never came back. 3 weeks later, some of them, their bodies floated in shore. They were out over practicing. Well, Cornelia then came to the States, and she joined the WASP. She heard about them, and she joined the WASP. Jackie, meantime, came home from England. Hearing about the WASP, she really got mad because all this time she was trying to get women recruited. So she requested that General Arnold give permission to her to recruit women to release pilots, and they had to be trained. And he finally, I understand she went into his office, and she was in there quite a while. And when she came out, she's smiling. She got permission to recruit women. And that was the beginning of the WASP. But they were called the Flying Detachment, the Women of the Flying Detachment, Training Detachment, the WFTD, because that was the name of the people that were that would be giving her the field where she would be teaching them. At first, they had to have 200 hours and be between the age of 21 and 35. And I remember when that came out, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm only 18, and I only had about 32 hours at the time, and I thought, how will I ever get in there? So, pardon me, at that time they had us to write to our senators and congressmen and everybody, and evidently they sent our letters on to Jackie Cochran because they didn't know where to write to. And so eventually they lowered the age to 18 and a half and the hours to 35. By that time I had 37 and a half. So I finally became eligible. And they also had to be an American citizen and have a high school, be high school graduates, and we had to pass a cadet exam and the Army Flight Surgeon Physical. So I got my letter to one night, it was a night letter to report out to, what's that air base up there? Columbus, the to report for my physical.
Port,
I can't think of.
Port something.
No, it's not. That's
That's-
Port Columbus.
that's
That's
Port
the
Columbus,
airport.
Hopefield is Middletown.
Yeah, the one that it's up in Columbus. Well, anyway, I had to report there and get my physical, and then after I passed my physical, I had to take a cadet exam, and I took it with about. I think there were 10 other men there just taking it, and about 5 of us passed it. Now the ones that didn't pass it got a chance to come back later and take it. So, but thank heavens I passed it the first time. We had to also be 64 inches tall, at least 5'4". We all had to pay our way. The first group to Wilmington, Delaware, and then later to Sweetwater, Texas. We had to pay our own ways.
How did you go?
Well, when I was out taking my physical, there were 2 other women there taking theirs, and we all agreed that if all 3 of us passed, we would drive down to Sweetwater. Well, the one girl, she had a car, and she said, both of you can drive, can't you? And I never drove before in my life, but I said yes. I figured I could. And then I went home and told my brother, and he took me out and tried to teach me. I guess he lost his temper a few times, I remember. But anyway, it was enough. And then when we passed, we all went down in her car. And for me, every time, I was just lucky I drove between cities. And whenever we come to a big city, I would tell them, gee, I feel kind of tired. Doesn't somebody else want to drive for a while? And that way, they never did know I didn't have a license or didn't. I learned to drive down. And a lot of times going down, too, it was very interesting. We met convoys of men in trucks, Army convoys, and we had to go around one truck, and then we'd drive between those 2 for a while, and then go around another one. So we were always waving to somebody. But ever so often we had hit a convoy driving down.
Do you remember what kind of car that was that you went down in?
Yes, it was, if I remember it was a 3-seater in front with a rumble seat. We put our luggage in the rumble seat. And that was the car that she took down, she owned. And it was a shame, though. She's the one that didn't make it. She was washed out. But it was nice that we had some way to go down. We all chipped in on the gas, which was a lot cheaper, because we didn't have too much money, any of us.
You don't remember what gas cost at that time, do you?
No, but it wasn't very much. I know it was probably about 25 cents a gallon, something like that, if it was that much. I don't remember exactly then, but I know that later, after I married and I had to buy gas, it was around 25 or 30 cents a gallon.
Of course, when you went down, too, the gasoline was rationed, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And
so did they give you coupons that you
we
could?
got coupons and everything like that. And then later, after I was married and I was in Florida, they had I don't know how I found out. It was either in the paper or something. There was going to be stopped inspections for make sure everybody had a license. So I went in and told them that I had an Ohio license, but I didn't have it with me. So they gave me a license in Florida to drive. That's how I got my first license. The second time I took just for the heck of it, I never did take a written, but I took a driver's test and passed it in Philadelphia later, because they said I had to have a license in Philadelphia. The Florida license wouldn't be that good very long. So I finally got a license, but I did study the rules and everything if I had to take a written. But we all had to pay our way down there, and then the classes were named after the ones that graduated. Like in the classes of 42, it was 42-1. That was the first class, and 42-2 was the second class to graduate. And then the next year would be like 43-1 and on up. And there were 8 in 42 and 43. There were 8 classes graduated that year, in each year. And then in 44 we had 10 classes. So we were named by the first class to graduate, and the year we graduated. By class 44-2, many changes were made. When they first went in, they only spent 16 weeks in training, and they did not get instruments. And an increase in training went from 16 weeks to 22 and a half, and finally, by the time I got in, we had to be in there 27 weeks. And they used to fly, the first plane they flew was a PT-19s, and they also had multiple engine flights. But by the time I got there, they changed it from the PT-19 to the bi-wing 17 was the first one, the primary training, and then it went to from multi-engine, and we also got instruments, which we flew the PT-13, and the AT-6 was advanced training. We also got cross-country, which the first girls didn't get. We were a part of the 319th Army Air Force Flight Training Detachment, and we started, it started at Hughes Field at Houston, and then which was called the Aviation Enterprises. That's what we were first called when we went in. And then then we went to Sweetwater, Texas. I think Jackie Cochran was given a field where there were English cadets there, I believe it was, and they were, they were going to shut the field down, so they told her she could use it for us at Sweetwater, Texas. So when the first group got there, there were still cadets on the field, and then after they graduated, eventually they were all left. We had no uniforms. We paid our own expenses, and the first group had to find their own lodgings before they went to Sweetwater, where there were lodgings there where the men had. But when the first group had to find their own lodgings, and some of them got motels and stayed together in a motel there. In May 1943, that's when they moved to Sweetwater, Texas. The WASP and the WFTD merged together. The first group that was called the WASP, which was the Women's Auxiliary Faring Service, and the WFTD merged on August 5th, 1943 to form the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, which was the WASP. But the WASP still keep their name, WAFS. It's just the first class, and they didn't have to train or anything, so they were different. They were the ones that were instructors and women that went in with Nancy Love in the Faring Service. When they merged, Jackie Cochran and Nancy Love didn't get along real well, so Jackie Cochran made herself the WASP Executive Air Command, and Nancy Love, she was head of the Faring Command then. And anyway, by the time I got there, we received instrument training in one phase. In the BT-13, we had to learn instruments, which was a very, very good and very well taught, I thought, lesson, because any tests we had to take later on, we always passed. Like I said, the elimination of the twin engine flight training ceased, and we had an increase in navigation cross country. We got a 1,000-mile and then a 2,000-mile cross country, and there was an increase in the ground school too. That's why we had to go more weeks. There were so it sort of And while I was there, the women that didn't have instrument training came back for it. And then we students used to go up as observers for them a lot, which released a lot of the instructors. 25,000 women responded to come into the WASP, and 1,830 of those were accepted. And 1,074 of us graduated, and then with the 28 WAFs, it made it 1,101. Many of the women were married, and we had from all walks of life. We had lawyers, we had teachers, I think we even had a movie star there once, they tell me. I don't know, I'd never ran into her, and if I did, I didn't know it. But we had them from all walks of life and everything. And many of them that were married, when they heard that we were going to be deactivated in 1944, they resigned. So if they were, I know there was a couple of them resigned that were even in training, and they didn't get their wings, and some of them still claim that they're WASP, but they're not. I mean, we can't take them in as our group because they never finished. They just quit. I don't know why they would do that, but anyway. Cornelia Fort, 38 of us died in active duty, and Cornelia Fort was the first one. She was the one that was at Pearl Harbor. She came back when she joined the WASP. She was with some cadets who were taking some BT-13s. They were ferrying them down to Florida. And there was one fellow that was kind of had a crush on her. And while they were supposed to be being in formation, he kind of got out and kind of trying to act funny in front of her, and he hit her wing. And she spun in and was killed. He went on, but they got him. I mean, they he knew what he did. He had to. And so I don't know what happened to him, but they say, somebody said something about it just took him out. I mean, he washed out. But she was the first one to die of the 38. During the 7 months of training, we had 400 hours of ground school, about 235 hours of flight training, and our studies included physics, aerodynamics, electronics, mathematics, Morse code, link trainer, navigation, military law, and courtesy. Although we were not in the Air Force, we were under the jurisdiction of them. And we were also taught to fly the Army way. There were a lot of women that had a lot more hours than I did, even some of those that had 200 hours. They were so set in their ways that when they didn't fly the way, the Army way, they washed out. And which surprised me. I mean, I thought that if anybody'd wash out, it'd be somebody that only had a few hours, but they really made it better than the ones who had a lot of hours. We also had meteorology, aircraft engines, and close order drill. And we followed a very strict military regimen. We had to march, we lived in barracks, and we had to march to and from every place we went. We always followed. We had somebody to direct us, and they would blow a whistle and we'd get out there and had to march, get in line and march every place. We had 6 women to a room with 1 bath between 2 rooms of 12 women. And we did calisthenics and ended a 16-hour-long day with taps. So we were all in the hands of the Army, although we were civilians, with the Army having no jurisdiction over us except that we had to follow. And that's what they said. They had no jurisdiction, but boy,
They still told you what to do.
they told us what to do. We took part in parades, infantry drill, barracks inspection. We had to have that. They came in with white gloves too, and swapped.
Would this be your cadre or would it be Army Air Force cadre?
Army did it.
Is that
Army
right?
officers.
Army officers
Yeah.
inspected your vehicle.
Inspected, came in with white gloves, and any dust we got, we call them demerits. You get so many demerits when you washed out too.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and they would, kind of accumulate if you didn't watch it. Yeah, we had and then we also took the oath of allegiance too, like the
To the
male
country,
cadets do. And we had oversized oak coveralls for our first flight suits handed down from the men, and they were such ill-fitted that we called them zoot suits. We wore 10 general pants and white shirts for dress. And we received finally our official uniform in 1944. It was still while I was in training. We received $150 a month in training, and then when we graduated, we got $250 a month. And out of that came, the first ones had to pay for their rooms when they lived in the motels before we went to Sweetwater. We also had to pay for our food and our clothes, anything we wore or had. Even our uniforms that were issued to us, we had to pay for those. Upon graduation, we had a commercial pilot's license and the equivalent to a college aeronautical degree, which I didn't find out till later. I didn't even know that, and I always wanted to go to school and get a degree, and here I had gotten
You had one.
Yeah. We performed out of more than 80 Army air bases, and 303 were sent to Air Transport Command, and they flew 9,200,000 miles in the Air Transport Command. We flew 1,260 planes of 77 types, and we flew over 60 million miles altogether, all of us. And we flew every plane that was made, including the B-29. 2 girls flew that. General Tibbets was having a problem with the men flying it. They were saying it was too dangerous, too big, and everything. So he took 2 of the women and taught them how to fly it. It took him about a week and a half, I guess it was. And then he let them go to different fields there and get out and walk around and let them know that they were the pilots of that plane, and he never had another problem. We received, when we graduated, a Form 8 white and passed the Air Force 50-3, Regulation 50-3. We had 55 hours under the hood, that's the link trainer, and 560 hours of ground school, and we had 55 hours under the hood when we were taking instruments, and 20 hours of link trainer. That was before we went under the hood. We had 137 hours of military training and 81 hours of physical training. We had to go, some of our physical time was, it was in the morning. We took the cattle wagon to the airport, to the swimming pool, and it was cold, and we had to go in there and do some calisthenics in the swimming pool. Boy, was that cold. Classes from 44-2, the classes up to 44-2 went to Orlando, Florida for 3 weeks training course to be officers. That was before we knew we were going to be disbanded. We flew as test pilots in prescribed manner after maintenance overhaul. That was one of my jobs with the BT-13. If the cadets cracked them up and they repaired them, then we had to fly them before they were allowed to. They told us we were expendable and the cadets weren't. And that's what they said to us. Of course, I don't think half of us knew what expendable meant, in a way. They said the cadets were too valuable.
Never happened today.
Yeah. We towed target sleeves for ground to air and air to air gunnery practice, some of the women came down with holes in the tails of their plane where they were shot. And we towed, at night for light and tracking crew, they towed gliders from C-47s and C-46s for combat glider pilots, flight and instrument pilots. And then they also were instructors for the cadets. A lot of them became instructors. We were pilots on administrative and utility personnel. I also did that. For administration, I would take officers that didn't know how to fly. I took them to different fields for administrative duty, and that was another one of my jobs too. We had miscellaneous and pickup and delivery documents. Some were classified secrets, and those girls had to carry guns with them. And we learned to radio-control drone flights, ferry planes from factory to port of embarkation. That was, of course, the ferry command. The activation of the WASP was costly to the war efforts and taxpayers. It deprived the Air Transport Command of 200 expert ferrying pilots, as well as tow target pilots, test pilots, and administrative pilots. It cost $1 million to train men to do our jobs, to do the women's jobs, and it hampered the delivery of planes from about 4 to 6 months. While these men were being trained. It also prevented men who were being transferred to ferry duty from completing training for specialized combat tasks. Women had 18 months experience which could not be replaced. And 50% of the pursuit ferrying in the United States had been done by the WASP. We finally received, after we were disbanded, we finally received our veteran status November 23rd, 1977 it was. And 32 years later, after the WASP program, women were admitted again to flight training within the Air Force, building on the success of the WASP program and the heritage of the WASP, and which established for all women aviation and aerospace. We even have astronauts telling us if it hadn't been for us, they used us to say, hey, women flew in World War II, and they used that to get permission to go into space. That's what they told us anyway. Today we have a flight group that's called the Flying Octogenarians. I never could say that word. They call them the UFOs, United Flying Octogenarians. You have to be 80 years old or over, and you have to have a current physical and FAA physical and license. And you have to have flown solo since your 80th birthday. And they serve 24 hours a day for half a year. There's Catherine Murphy, I know her, she belongs to it. When they had that earthquake out in California, she did a lot of flying. She was 80-some years old, and she did a lot of flying for them, picking people up, and, so she said she was busy every day with her plane. So that's the group that came out of that today. But anyway, we still have women come up to us when we're at different fields, like at the air show up in Dayton. We still have women come in, and I want to shake your hand for what you've done for us. Even the mechanics. We founded an organization for them called the Women Military Aviators, and that includes all the women pilots of today and the navigators. They don't have to be pilots, but the navigators and mechanics belong to them, and any of the women that's in the Air Force. members that have anything to do with planes. And they meet one year, and then next year we meet, and they come to our reunion, we go to theirs. So we get to know them pretty well. And it includes a lot of the astronauts. That's how I got to know Katie Coleman. And it's real nice. I mean, they come up and talk to us all the time and at air shows and stuff. And it makes us feel kind of good that we did something more than just
Absolutely.
fly
Absolutely.
for the country. For
Well, Betty, I wonder if you would provide us with some of your background, your bio information about where you were born and your age. And
Well, I was born
little
in
bit-
September the 12th in 1922 in Columbus, Ohio. And when I was a little girl, my family liked to go out to the airport on Sunday afternoon. There wasn't television, and of course they had radios, but we didn't listen too much to that. And we would go out and watch planes take off and land. And I always thought, what a great thing that would be to fly. That's where I got my itch to fly, I guess you'd call it. And I remember one Sunday when my uncle decided that he was going to pay for everybody to go up. I think it was like $1 or $1.50, something like that, a ride. So I couldn't.
Excuse me, that was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money. Yeah, dresses were only $10, and I can remember that. Yeah, and it was. I mean, money. I mean, to work you got from 15 to 25 cents an hour. And anyway, he was going to take us out, and whoever wanted to go up, going to ride. So I couldn't wait to go. I was just itching, but I had to go to the bathroom. And I didn't want to go because I was afraid they'd take off without me. And then I knew if I went in the car, I wouldn't get to go up. So I ran up to the bathroom, and when I came down, they were gone. And I remember my grandfather being there, and I cried. Oh, did I cry? And he says, well, Joe. That's my Uncle Joe. You know him. I mean, if you're not here, he's not going to wait for anybody. And I can remember I was heartbroken. And that was the only chance I got until when I got out of high school, I took a job and I started saving my lunch money. Like lunch was maybe 50 cents or 75 cents for lunch or something, and I put that away. I wouldn't eat. And I saved every cent I could get. And then I went out to the airport and I looked around for a little bit, and the manager of the airport, I told him I wanted to learn to fly if I could, but I wanted to take a ride in a plane first because I'd never been up. And so there was a instructor there named Frenchie Bauer, and I didn't know it at the time, but he did not believe that women should be flying. So I remember Gomer Jones, who was the manager, he told Frenchie to take me up. And Frenchie said, okay. So I get in the plane, and I thought, oh, how beautiful when we took off to look down there. And the one thing that really hit me was how straight all the lines were. Everything was straight or going this way, east or west or everywhere. Anyway, everything seemed straight. And I was so happy, and all of a sudden, I didn't know what he did, but I thought something happened to the plane. And what he did, he had went up and did a spin. And of course, I thought we were crashing. I held onto the seat, and he pulled out of it, and my stomach was just all. Then he stalled it, and that's another one, I thought. And to stall a plane in those days isn't like today. Today you can hardly stall a plane. But then when you pulled it up, it went straight down. and I thought we were going to crash again. Well, by the time my ride was over with, I think it was 15 or 20 minutes, I was so sick at my stomach and I was so mad. I realized he was doing tricks in there and he made me feel bad. So I got out of the plane, didn't say a word to him, and kept from throwing up. And I went in and I threw up and I cried. And then I got mad. And I got so mad when I found out what he was doing, because a couple of the girls in there told me, oh, he probably spun your nostalgia, you know. He doesn't like women. So I went out. I dried my eyes and I went out. And he said to me, well, I guess you don't want to fly, do you? You don't want to learn to fly. And I said, yes, sir, I do. Like that. And he looked at me for a little bit. He says, damn it, I'm going to teach you. So he was my instructor, and he soloed me finally, and we were friends. But I'll never forget that as long as I live, how sick I was. I mean, I didn't get sick after that, but I knew what they were doing then. But I started flying, and then that's when while I was out there, I heard about the WASP, and I thought, gee, the government pay you to fly? This would be great. So I tried to find out where to write, and then they told me to write to our senators or congressmen, and I finally did that. They must have sent the letters on.
How long was it, do you suppose, from the time you start writing until you actually that
I started
notification?
writing in I think I heard about them in late 42, and I didn't get my letter from them until it was at the end of 43. And then I went out and took the test, Lockburn Air Base.
Oh.
That's where it was. Took my physical and the written and all that. And then I had to wait again until I think it was April of 44 that I went in, April. Oh, that I met those girls and we drove down.
And here you thought the military is going to pay you to fly, huh?
Yeah, well, if not so much as pay me to fly as to pay for our flight.
Pay
I
for the
didn't care
flight.
whether they paid me or not, just as long as I could fly. And then when we were disbanded, a lot of us went to the Air Force and told them we'd fly for nothing. They didn't even have to pay us, but General Arnold said, nope. The men came back and they were the ones that, gee, these women are taking our jobs and everything, and we want to fly, and we're not going to get to fly if they're flying. And so, of course, he listened to them. And in my book that I wrote, I don't give General Arnold the credit for us going in. I give it to Colonel Olds, because he talked General Arnold into it. But General Arnold took the credit.
Would you please mention your book?
Yes, first I started, I wrote I noticed that some of the classes had a class book, and I did this class book of my class, and I put a lot of pictures of the field into it, and had the women to each give me their own story, the stories in their own words. And then I have pictures of the reunion up to 1996 in it that we had, different places. And it was so successful, the women liked it so well, and I got to thinking about the other women in the service. Not every class had a class book. So I decided to contact every woman. So I sent a letter to every woman in the Air Force, in the WASP, and asked them if they'd like to be in a book. And it was so successful. They were so happy about it, and I asked them to send me their life story from the time they were born with their birth date, and how they got interested in flying, how they got into the WASP, what they flew, the planes they flew into the WASP, and where they were stationed, and then what they did with their lives after they got out.
You might mention who's on the cover.
Oh, that's me on the cover. It's this picture.
Well, let's don't do that just yet.
No, okay. It's a picture of me. I had gotten out of the AT-6 and was signing the white card that we had to to always, after each flight, what was, if anything was wrong with the plane or if it flew okay. And somebody took a picture of me. Then the artist took it and made a painting, and he was an aviation artist, and he put the AT-6s in there, and we used it for the dust cover. And on the back is a quilt that my daughter made, and my picture in the helmet was in the middle here, but they thought there were so many pictures, too many pictures of me, so they took it out and put a pair of wings. But my daughter made that for me, and it has 673 stories in their of the women in their own words. Has the history of the how the WASP were formed. Has over 1,000 pictures. I have a graduation picture for each woman, and 400 sent me their now picture. So I have before and now, then and now. And then Katie Coleman and General Tibbetts did the forwards for me. And everybody that's bought it loves it.
Betty, in that regard, are there any other notable Hollywood people or generals that you met through your ferrying service?
I was just trying to think. There's several women. I should tell you a little bit about Mary Ann Showers. She was a classmate of mine. She became the judge of the Supreme Court of Arizona. And when Ronald Reagan was president, he asked her if she would consider being judge of the Supreme Court of the United States. And she had just been told she had terminal cancer. So Sandra O'Day Connor is the one that took her place. And then we have another one, Pinky Breyer was a classmate, and she used to take Earl Stanley Gardner out to the desert when he was working on a book, and she would fly him wherever he wanted to go. He'd call her up and ask her, to take him flying places. And she is now Perry Mason's pilot in his books.
Huh.
So she sent me a book and had her name underlined in that. And then there's also Dora Doherty and Dora Strader are the first women to fly the B-29s. I think that's kind of interesting too. And we have women that are still flying, and there's Margaret Ringenberg, who flew around the world when she was 82 with a couple English pilots, women pilots, and she took them around the world, and she is still delivering planes for people. They buy it and call her up, and she goes to the factory, pick it up, and delivers it for them. And she's still doing it. I guess she's about 85 now. And we have so many stories in here. They're all in here about what they did. It's really interesting to note how the women have continued flying.
Betty, let's touch on your particular aspect, what you actually did in the WASP, the aircrafts that you flew, and the functions and what have you.
We trained, while we were in training, we had the PT-17, that's the Stearman, and then we had the BT-13, which was the instrument plane, and the AT-6. Then I was stationed at a B-24 base, and there I tested, as I said, the BT-13s for them, and I got to fly the UC-78, the AT-10, AT-11 as co-pilot, and the fellas that flew the B-24s, I'd let them take the BT-13 up, my BT-13, and I'd take off and land, though. I wouldn't let them do it, because they were used to landing way up in the air anyway, and I let them take it up and do whatever they want with it. They had a good time with it, and they would take me up in the B-24, and I have about 24 hours as co-pilot, and I started as first pilot then, and I've got about 2 hours now as first pilot. But I would anytime take a pursuit plane. I mean, you just sit there in the bomber and just fly straight and level. But I think the other planes that are more fun to fly.
Well, with these trainers, were you actually training people, or were you ferrying the aircraft, or just what were you doing?
What I did, I went on administrative duty. I used to fly non-flying officers to fields on administrative duty a lot in my PT-13. And in the in the AT-11 and AT-10, I was co-pilot with another pilot. Maybe it was a man, or it could one of the women that were stationed there at the field, who had multi-engine time. We would go to fields and pick up aircraft parts and stuff like that to different fields, and that's why I got to fly co-pilot in that.
Part of this ferrying service, was any of that done from like the manufacturing site, like where up in Columbus, where they assembled the what was it, the P-40s? Were the planes flown from the manufacturing site to
wherever they were,
to
their
where they were
destination. Going? A lot of them were flown to the border of the states, and like at the border up in Canada, Russian pilots would pick them up and take them, the ones we sold to Russia. They would pick them up and take them.
Oh, you would fly them up to the Canadian border?
We were not allowed out of the United States. Okay. One day, I think Nancy Love and a couple of the women were going to take off, and I guess they were going to fly to England or something, and they even got down to the end of the taxi strip when they were called back. General Arnold decided not to let anybody leave the States. That's as far as we got, and so we never left the States. But there was a lot of ferrying. Teresa James tells it when she tells you in the her story. One day she packed just a shirt to take with her, and or she didn't even pack a shirt. She was supposed to take a plane and ferry it to another city and come back on the train. Sometimes they came back on the trains and hauled with their parachutes. And she got there, and they said, well, we have another plane that has to be delivered someplace else. She delivered that, and she was 2 weeks delivering planes. And she said, finally, she said her pants were so bowled over, I mean, fitted so they looked like little mountains when she stood straight. And she said she washed out her undershirt and her underclothes ever so often. She said, and about 3 weeks later she came back, and that's all. She said she was wrung out. But that she just kept ferrying planes from different places. As she stopped, they said, hey, we got a plane that has to go here and there. And she tells that story, and she's really funny telling it. But a lot of them did that. They ferried planes, and then they would be asked to take another plane someplace. And I think that would have been interesting. Of course, I didn't get to do that. That was the earlier. Well, she was a WAF too. They had. They did a lot of flying different planes. Whenever they would bring any new planes in, they would ask, check women out in them. And they did a lot of different things that they relieved the men.
What about security clearances? Did you have a clearance?
I didn't have any thing to do with that, but then they did those ones that were, going with having those missions that they had to pick up documents. And things.
I thought maybe with some of the aircraft, with some of the instrumentation that they had on board, might have been classified or what have you.
Could have been. I don't know about that. I mean, it's been so long
since
I
absolutely.
Went through those stories. It took me 3 years to put the book together, and I read every story, of course. And but there's a lot of in there, about them talking about what they did and things that happened. It's been very interesting. I don't think there's there's only a little, maybe around 400 of us left now out of the 1,075, and each one of them, we still get together and talk about what we did and and things and what we do with our lives. When I married my husband, I was determined I was going to fly, but we had 7 children, and you don't fly with 7 children. But when I did, I took them up. When I went back to flying in '68, I took my children up for a ride. My 3 younger ones went with me, but my husband wouldn't go. I found out, I couldn't believe it, after he passed away in September, or in 2000, year 2000, from Alzheimer's. I found out he was afraid of flying. And I can't believe it. I lived with him. We were married, 5 days later, we'd have been married 55 years. Of course, he didn't know anything for about 5 years. But I can't believe my son finally told me he was afraid of flying. He told me. I couldn't believe it. He told me that he was wanted to be a pilot, and that he had a heart murmur or something, which I never knew. I mean, never showed up. I should have guessed. And he couldn't be a pilot, but he was a maintenance officer. And but I
he just fixed him. He didn't have to fly him, right?
I can't believe that he wouldn't go with me on an air. If we go on a vacation and flew, he would always make some excuse, and I'd go on. But if we were driving someplace, he was always going, and that never clicked.
Well, how would he get there if he would fly?
Well, he didn't go.
Oh, he'd find a reason not to go.
Yeah.
I see.
He would always, something about he had to work or something. Yeah. Go ahead and enjoy yourself. I thought, oh, okay. But I can't believe I lived with a man for 55 years and didn't know. Never caught on.
Yeah. Betty, what sort of organizations do you belong to presently?
Oh, let's see. I don't know if I can name them all.
Well, just give us a sample of them.
I belong to the, the Air Force Museum up in Dayton. I belong to that, and I belong to the Women's Military Aviators, of course, the WASP, the Women in Aviation. Let's see. I don't know, there's about 2 or 3 others.
That's very good.
Member of them.
That's great. That's great.
And I also have friends that have a PT-26. That's about the same thing as a PT-19. And they take me up and let me fly it.
Where's it kept? Where is it?
It's at Butler County.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Really?
They're the ones I go with to air shows. They have a tent.
Wow.
But they take me up and let me fly. And,
golly.
It's really neat because it's like the PT-19. First time I did it, I'll never forget. We were at Lunken Airport. He said, I want you to fly it back to Butler. So I said, well, you take off and land, because, when somebody owns a plane like that, you don't want to mess it up. So he took off, and he said, okay, it's all yours. And I sat there, and I looked at the control of the instruments, and I caught myself flying instrument. And I was just watching those instruments. Boy, I had that plane going nice. And then I thought, oh, my gosh, I better look around, see if there's anybody else coming or something. And I was real happy when he told me. He says, boy, he said, you really had great control of that plane, and you did it. I went right to the Butler County Airport, and then I said, okay, you can land it. I think I could have landed it, but I don't want to take it.
What kind of markings are on the plane?
It's a yellow plane, and it, I forget the name. Isn't that awful? I don't remember the number of it. He has it all yellow.
It's all yellow.
It's his.
I have to watch for it.
Yeah, he and another young girl fly it. Own it, and his wife comes along with him. And it's funny when he told me his wife doesn't like to fly. I thought, well, gee, okay. I remember now that Phil didn't like to. So, but this other girl, he owns it, and they're real good to me. I also I'm going to be flying a Stearman too. A friend of his has a Stearman, and he's anxious for me take it, go up with him and fly it.
Where would that be?
That's a Butler too.
Oh, it's over there also. Wow, great.
So I can't wait to do that. It'll be fun to get back in the Stearman.
Might mention that you spend some time up at Oshkosh
Oh yeah,
last couple of years, I guess.
I have been going every year to Oshkosh.
For what period of time?
It's in July.
I mean,
Oh.
last 10 years, or?
Oh yeah, about the last 10 years. Yeah, and my grandson got a ride in a plane, and he's itching to be a pilot. He's 14, so I took him to Oshkosh with me, and he joined the EAA as a young eagle. And then I have another grandson that's a pilot. He teaches, and he's an instructor, and they have their own plane. He lives in California, and he really loves it too. He went to the Air Force Academy, and he was going to take flying there, and they found he had a torn retina. So they told him that they didn't want to do surgery. There was 50% chance it wouldn't work. So after he got out, a friend of his father owned a plane. So they started flying it. He got his instructor's rating and everything.
Oh, he's really.
So it healed, the retina did, but it wasn't enough for the Air Force. And so he took engineering course, which was great.
Sure, absolutely.
Because that helped him a lot.
Absolutely.
But he loves flying. And they're the only two in the family that were pilots. I had a daughter that would love to have been a pilot, but we couldn't afford it.
Sure.
By that time, it was cost so much to fly that we couldn't have given her lessons. I didn't know she wanted to fly so bad, but she really would have loved to have flown.
Betty, is there anything else you'd like to add or comment?
No, just that I think that if I give talks a lot. I've given them to Girl Scouts, Brownies, students in school, grade schools, high schools, senior citizens, pilots, glider pilots, which took me up for a ride after I gave a talk and let me fly it. And I'd rather have some power.
You'd rather hit power?
And I've given talks, and I've told them all that, especially the young ones, that if they have a dream and if they want to fly and want to real bad, don't let anything stop you. You can save your money. You can, there's always a way that you can, and no matter what you want, but if you have a dream to really go ahead and do everything you can, because if you want to do something, there's no reason not to. Don't let anything stop you, because you can do it. You can work and use part of your salary to whatever, and no matter what you want to be in life, to follow that dream, because it's worth it. And especially get an education, though. Tell them, be sure and get your education. That's more important than anything that you want to do. Follows.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your contribution to the country and for what you did and what the ladies did and the forerunners of the space program. And
well, I'll tell you what we usually say. We were in Cincinnati when Women in Aviation was here, and there were a few of us at a table, and we were signing autographs and I was signing my books, and we were there. And some girls came out and thanked us for what we did, and one of the women sitting next to me, after they left, she said, "Betty, what did we do?" I said, "Don't ask me, but don't knock it." But it's just, all we did was really do something we loved.
talk us through this then.
Okay. Well, that's what we wore to fly the PT-17s.
Well, you might mention who this is, please.
Oh, This is me
Okay.
when I was 20 years old. And let's see one. You can point to the one you're
The
on.
top one.
Okay, this is where I had a cross country to Des Moines, Iowa, in the PT-17. And this girl here, she was flew with me. One flew one way, one flew the other, and this was at Des Moines, where someone took a picture of us. This is my instructor, AT6 instructor.
Do you know his name? You
Picture.
know his name? Oh, that's okay.
This is the field, our field where the hangar is, and that we took off. And I think that's the runway. Anyway, and then this is my first instructor. I really don't remember his name unless it's on there. He was our first instructor, and this is when we're in our zoot suits, the men's hand-me-downs coveralls that we wore. That was the first in the Stearmans. Here first. This is where we live, and this is our wishing well. And when we solo, the girls throw us in the wishing well. And that's where they're sitting on there. And this is our bays where we lived, and with 6 women in each bay and one bath between. This is our living area there. This is a cattle wagon that was converted for us to sit and go to auxiliary fields to fly. The one girl would fly the plane over, and then the rest of us would go in the cattle wagon, and we'd fly from there. This is the commanding officer of the field, and this is Dee Dee, who was our house mother when we were in training. She was sort of, we'd go to her for everything. And Dee Dee Deaton. And then this is another picture of the field where we were probably had some time between flights and where we lived, our living area. And then this is Mary Jones. She and I, with the women in training, women trainees only, sign that we had on the field. This is our flight line with the Stearmans, as you can see here, and I think that's the BT-13 sitting there. Over here is our 3 of my bay mates with me, as we had 6 in a bay, but here was just 3 other ones, 4 of us that lived in the bay together. And then this again is our living area, and at the end it was blocked off with this is a washroom where we could do laundry and stuff. And out here was a sidewalk where the mechanics going to work in the morning, and that's why the sign was there. There would be a sidewalk there. Over here, this one. This is the 2 girls that went down with me at the beginning. We drove down from Ohio to Sweetwater, Texas. And that's Mary Jones, the one that was in this picture here. And then this is Kathy, I think her name was. She had the car that we drove down in, but she washed out early. Yeah, I think she had a nervous breakdown or something. And then this is where we had one of those sandstorms that Texas was famous for, and we had to hold the plane down because it was so strong that it would have just pulled the anchors out of the sand. So we all had to go out with helmets and our scarves around our mouths and from the sand and hold it down. And this is a picture of me with the Stearman PT-17. This is our uniform that we wore during the day before we got our regular uniforms. This is a tan color pants that we called generals, and our white shirts and our caps that we wore for every day. And then this is our winter flying suit that was handed down from the men. You can see it was too big for me, but it fit not too bad. And then we had the boots too to keep our feet warm, and that was our flying suit in the PT-17 in the winter, which was very felt very good after we got in the plane. This is our uniform. We have WASP here, and then the little wing there, and then these are our wings. And on our shoulders, where we were stationed, we had a pin that showed the where we were stationed on our shoulders, but you can't see it there. And then this is the picture Mother took of me right after I got my wings. I was waiting for the bus to take me to the train to take me to my field, which was Courtland, Alabama. And this is a picture of Katie Coleman, the astronaut, who did my forward for me. That was taken up in Dayton when I was with her at one of the reunions. And this is Dora Doherty. She's one of the 2 women that flew the B-29 for General Tibbets. And that was taken at Akron when we were just a couple months ago, and we were up there at an air show. I don't know if you want those other 2 pictures or not. This is Helen Cannon. Her husband used to buy the food for the casinos at in Las Vegas, and she taught school there, the middle school. And that was years ago in 1950s and 60s, and I took a picture of her in front of it. She changed the teaching, the curriculum, or whatever they call it, the teaching there, and she did such a marvelous job that they named the school after her. And we were there when I visited with her. She took me over to the school. This is Pam Black that was on a panel with me at the Air Force, out of Wright-Patterson at base, and she's the pilot of the B-1 bomber. Very young, but boy, very capable of it. It's a huge plane, and we were together on a panel in May. And this is a picture that Tim, the friend of mine that lets me fly his PT-26, he and another girl own it, and he lets me fly, and he took this picture for me to have at air shows to sign. And this is a picture of me trying to squat down on the AT-6.
The trouble was...
Yeah. And then this is the commanding officer of our field, and as you see there, the Army Director of Flying, Hubbard, Major Hubbard, when we were in training. Of course, this is our Fifi Nella that Walt Disney gave us. She's a little gremlin that's supposed to flirt with the men gremlins, and they take their minds off of our planes so they wouldn't mess it up. She's our mascot.